Generative fill has now been added to Lightroom, but is it any good? And is it the best way to remove objects, spots and blemishes from your photo? Let's find out, and I'm going to start right now. So when it comes to removing objects inside Lightroom, you've now actually got three options. You've got the removal tool, thanks to the new generative fill. You've got the healing brush tool, as well as you've got the clone tool. Now take this photo as an example. This is a photo I've taken in St. Paul's. I took it about last week, I think, and I took it around 2-3 p.m. Usually I like going there in the morning. There's far less people, but this time I actually went just after midday. It was lunchtime, and as you can see, there's lots of people sitting in the park. You've got people sitting over here, you've got some people walking through, and then you've got a bench on the left-hand side. And ideally, I don't want anyone in this image. Now, previously, before generative fill was added, it would take a decent amount of time. Actually, I would actually take this photo from Lightroom into Photoshop and then use generative fill inside Photoshop. But now, thanks, we can actually do it inside Lightroom. So, if we go ahead and zoom in, what we need to do is firstly go over to our healing tool or removal tool that we can see here. And you can see it's split into three different sections. You've got your removal tool here, you've got your healing brush tool, and then you've got your clone tool. Now, it really depends on the subject or what you want to remove. If you're removing small objects, then I'd recommend simply using the removal tool without generative fill built in, or use the healing brush tool. For the main reason of time. It takes a lot longer to use generative fill because basically it uploads your photo to the cloud, use generative fill, and then brings it back down again. So it really depends on the speed of the internet as well as the speed of your computer. And it can take 30 seconds up to a minute depending on different variables, the complexity of your edit, as well as how fast your internet is. So for small examples, like for example, if we go ahead and zoom in, let's say you want to remove some gum from the ground here, I would probably actually use the healing tool found right next to the removal tool. We'll go ahead and create a small selection there. What it will do is it will sample an area. We can actually remove that area as so, and you can see it's created a far better, quicker selection, and it's done it really nicely. So for small little objects, I would actually stick to the previous tools found inside Lightroom. But if you're removing larger objects, let's say people or any larger object, maybe a tree on the right-hand side of your image, then I would use generative fill. So to do that, let's find a new subject. So let's say these three people walking in the distance. Let's go over again to the removal tool, but this time we're going to select the actual removal tool itself. Make sure, firstly, obviously your Lightroom is up to date, but you've got generative fill ticked. If you don't have it ticked, it will just simply remove it using the classic removal tool inside Lightroom. Then what you'll need to do is actually select your area. So I'm going to go ahead and create a quick selection of these three people here. Very similar to you would do in Lightroom. But this time, what we're going to do is create a quick selection, making sure everything is included, so there's no arms or legs or heads sticking outside of your selection. So we've made a selection like so, and then that's the area that we're targeting, and make sure you go ahead and click apply. And then what this will do is it will use generative remove to actually look at the image. Again, it uploads it to the cloud, removes it for you, and as you can see, it will give you now three variations, very similar to the Photoshop's generative fill. So you can see these variations here. We've got variation 1, we've got variation 2, and then lastly, we've got variation 3. And you kind of want to pick which one works best. I would say, I think variation 1 probably looks the best. And as you can see, it's done a lot better job than any of the other tools found in the classic Lightroom. So the clone tool, that certainly wouldn't have done a very good job because we're kind of working on a complicated background. There's trees, there's buildings in the way, and there's no way to duplicate that because that's what the clone tool does. And again, the healing brush tool works very similarly, but generates new pixels from the pixels around it. Very similar to content aware inside Photoshop. Now, it doesn't work 100%, and it still, I don't think, is as good as the classic Photoshop generative fill. So if you're doing very complicated objects or expanding your image, for example, then I would take that over to Photoshop. But in most situations, I do now think generative fill is pretty good. It's not 100%, but it's a lot better than the other tools found in Lightroom. But don't think you have to use it all the time. Remember, if you're removing smaller objects, stick to the classic clone tool or simply healing brush tool found inside Lightroom. Here is the before, and here is the after. And make sure if this particular tutorial helped you out, write it down in the comments below.